The man that joins us now on the Bud Light Hotline, powered by Adams Beverages, is Dr. Gary White, who got his bachelor's degree, his master's degree, and his doctorate from the University of Alabama. He served the athletic department in numerous capacities. Started out as a graduate assistant football coach, was the dorm director, was in charge of athletic academics, and later became the compliance director before retiring in 1996, and really close friends with Coach Rutledge. Good morning, Dr. White. How are you?
Fine. How are you, Gary?
Doing well. Just listening to that little story there from Coach Rutledge. That he was one of those that when he told Coach Bryant stories, he could give you chills.
That's right. He could take you there, no doubt about it.
We mourn his passing, but it was a life well lived, no doubt about it. I said this on another radio show that I was on before my show this morning. They were asking me about him, and I said, well, I got to know him pretty well when I moved here to take this job that I have now in the late 90s, and he would call me often to talk about videos that he wanted to put together. You know how much he loved the offensive line, and I remember the thing that he would talk about was, you could take an offense, and it wouldn't matter if you ran the split veer, the wishbone, the eye, whatever you ran, how good your quarterback was, your running backs. If that offensive line didn't work and wasn't good, you couldn't be successful. And he loved the thought process of that 5 fingers in a glove, how they all had to be in sync, particularly the center and the guards. He loved that interior offensive line play. And the thing I remember, Dr. White, was he would talk to anybody about football. He loved the game of football. It didn't matter if you'd played at the highest level or you were just a fan. If you asked him a football question, he would sit down with you, and the next thing you know, it's 30 or 45 minutes later, and you're like, Coach, I got to go. He loved talking football, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He every staff after he became dorm director and left the field, he would go talk with those guys, coaches, and find out information, about what they were doing and that kind of thing. He kept living it the entire time. And, of course, like you said, he had this idea of putting all these film together, and he put a lot of them together. I don't know what's left or anything like that, but he was in sync with it. No doubt about that.
Yeah, he loved offensive line play and what it meant to a football team. His lovely wife Norma, his sons David and Tim, he's survived by them. And the one thing about Coach, and I don't know how many people you can say this about, but I can honestly say this, and I know you know him longer and better than I do, but he's one of those people I never heard anybody say a bad word about him ever.
No, Jack was really a fine man. And outstanding coach. I'm going to miss him terribly. He and I were close all these years. We came in here together as freshmen in '57, and just struck it up, and became good friends then, and have remained good friends all the way through. And a lot of things that we did overlap with each other, and we were constantly, connecting with each other. And even after both of us retired, we stayed in touch all the time, and I'm really going to miss him, I tell you.
A lot of people do. I was thinking last night, just since I've lived here, those that have left us, Coach Griska, Coach Hennessy, Coach Rutledge, others, that those ties to Coach Bryant. Now, there's still a lot of guys that played for him and a lot of still former assistant coaches that are here, but guys that were really close to him that went way back with him the way those gentlemen do. They were ties to Coach Bryant in a way that when you talk to them, like I said, it's almost like talking to Coach Bryant. We're starting to lose some of those folks.
Oh, I know. We're down to the minimum now. I tell you, there's not but 1 or 2 left, and there's a couple of young coaches that was on our staff back there, Steve Hill and Tex Poole, and but they're about the only ones left, younger. The rest of us are older, naturally, and there's a few of us, but now the list is dropping down pretty fast.
You had some experience with the dorm, Coach Rutledge. I've talked to people that when he was the dorm director, whether it be under Coach Bryant or Coach Stallings, and they said, those dorms could get a little rowdy, but everybody loved Coach Rutledge and Norman, wanted to do well for them, but talked about how when he'd come through the little lobby or living area, whatever you'd call it, oftentimes people would be down there visiting, and he he'd grab a football then. And he said, I was told he'd get some of those offensive linemen together and they'd work on stuff right there in the dorm.
Jack would do that. I'll tell you right now, he lived it, no doubt about that.
Dr. White, as a football coach, part of a lot of championships, won a national championship as a player. Worked with the centers and kicking game and different aspects, whatever Coach Bryant asked him to do. How good a football coach was he?
He was outstanding, Coach. I tell you right now, he studied it and lived it, and that's what you have to do as a coach. Plus, on top of that, recruiting. He was an outstanding recruiter. He recruited Tony Nathan. I never will forget that night of the Banks Woodlawn game up there. I was recruiting Jack Rutledge, and I was on one side, and he was recruiting Tony Nathan, and he was with Tony's parents on the other side, and and we used to talk about that all the time, you just had so many things you had to do back then. Now where they have specialists for every little thing, back then you had to handle all those duties, but he enjoyed it, loved people, and was a fantastic motivator on top of that, and did an outstanding job.
Dr. Gary White with us, remembering Coach Jack Rutledge. That's a great story about that Woodlawn Banks game because, we remember the great famous game and over 40,000 there at Legion Field, but it worked out pretty well because you got your man in Rutledge and he got his man in Woodlawn, and they led Alabama to a national championship.
National championship.
That was pretty good night's work, wasn't it?
It was. It was outstanding. I tell you, I loved it.
You mentioned how things have changed, and we know what Coach Saban's doing here right now. It's a great time to be an Alabama fan or a sportscaster covering Alabama, or a student athlete. It's similar to the run Coach Bryant had, but it is different. It is. You kind of alluded to that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s. It was a different time, and we didn't have the specialization. The game for Alabama still was a little more of a regional game. Not that Coach Bryant wouldn't go to California or Indiana or the Northeast to get a player every now and then, but we didn't have as much media. All the games weren't on television. It was, I hate to use the term romantic, but it was really kind of more of a romantic era. When you got to come and see a game in person, it was something special. And if Alabama played on TV on a Saturday on the game of the week, it was just different, I guess is what I'm not better or worse, but just different. And I know that some of us that even me at 54 living through Coach Bryant's dynasties there in the 70s, some of that feeling you miss it, don't you?
Yes, I do. It was different. It's like you said, was kind of a romantic era. We didn't play on TV that much, not near as much as Alabama does this day and time or any other team. There's just so much out there, but praise the Lord, we didn't have social media back then.
Oh, thank goodness.
That's what I tell people all the time. I'm so thankful we didn't, that it was just people would come see the games and there wasn't all these rumors floating around all the time and all of that stuff, distractions and everything. It was just pure football, Something else, and I know people in Tuscaloosa may cringe when I say this, but you'll know where I'm going with this. At that time, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and the going to Legion Field, that was the football capital of the South. That's where most of the big games were played. And I know when I first got in the TV business, I loved coming down to cover games in Tuscaloosa when I was starting out there at Channel 40 in Anniston. But when Alabama would come to Birmingham, it just, because you knew it was going to be a big game. Oftentimes it was on television. That was some kind of special time. Well, it was like a parade coming to town. I mean, it was just that atmosphere, built around Legion Field, and us coming and all the buses with the sirens going and all of that stuff, leading both teams in there and all. It was just, it's just hard to explain the how great it was to witness that and be a part of it. It was something else. And for the younger fans that don't remember when the Iron Bowl was played in Birmingham, and I know Auburn people, they're not going to agree with us because they want, but that 50-50 split in Legion Field, when it was crimson and white half the stadium and orange and blue in half the stadium, and both fan bases pumped up, that
You'll never duplicate that. I'm sorry.
Never.
It's great in Bryant-Denny. It's great in Jordan here, but the Iron Bowl in Legion Field was special. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, it was. It really was. We lost when they went to home and home. We just lost that atmosphere that, it's hard to replace.
It is. Coach Rutledge, like a lot of the coaches under Coach Bryant, when Coach Perkins came in, he wanted to do things his own way, obviously, and for a lot of folks that had involved with Coach Bryant, that was a tough time.
Yeah.
What about Coach Rutledge? How did he handle that? Do you remember, Coach? Dr. White?
He handled it with class and dignity. He was dorm director then, and as well as coaching at that time. And of course, he had to come off the field when Ray got here, and but he handled it with class and dignity, and was running the dorm, and then decided to do something else, but came back a little later and ran the dorm again, and did an outstanding job of that. He and Norma.
Yeah, how exciting for him was that when Coach Stallings came, and for a lot of you guys that have been with Coach Bryant to kind of for a few years recapture that Coach Bryant magic to some degree. There were a lot of similarities in how Coach Stallings did things. How exciting was that for Coach Rutledge?
Well, it was really exciting. All of us had ties with him because he was a young coach. He just had graduated from A&M when Coach Bryant came here, and Coach Bryant brought him with him, and Dee Powell and a couple of other coaches, and all of us really identified with him because he was so young. And we developed ties with him while he was here, and then when he came back, it was like a young Coach Bryant was driving back on the scene. And, I mean, he talked like him, his mannerisms were like him, but he was different, He wasn't trying to be Coach Bryant or anything, but we just, all of us that were here back then identified with him, and it was just a sweet, sweet time to have him here,
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good stuff. We talked about his family, mentioned, of course, Norma Rutledge is I don't know her obviously nearly as well as you do, and don't know her that well, but know what a great woman and person
she is. Sweet, sweet lady.
And
absolutely.
you feel so. Even though he lived a great life, and he and his two sons and his wife had a great relationship, you feel for them because that's
yes.
They're hurting right now.
Oh, they are, no doubt about that. I was out there yesterday morning with them before Coach Rutledge passed away, and just to be in that room with them and share that time with them, it's just, I could just hurt with them and feel that, because I've had things in my life where my wife passed away and a daughter a year and a half ago, and I know how bad you hurt from that, and I was hurting along with them.
Coach Griska, Coach Hennessy, Coach Rutledge, they were all good. Out of the three, who, if you had to just pick one of them to tell Coach Bryant's story, it's tough, but which one of them would you pick?
Well, I think probably Jack and Dude would be the best ones. I think Clem was like me; he was more reserved.
Yeah.
But Jack and Dude could do a pretty good job of telling stories about.
Yeah,
them.
together that was the best. But between the one thing for Coach Rutledge, he would be a little more. And you know what I'm saying with Coach Hennessy, he had that little edge to him, and he didn't mean anything by it. But Coach Rutledge would be more, just straightforward. Coach Hennessy would take a dig or two at Coach Bryant, even in his storytelling. And I'm told even when Coach Bryant was coaching, Coach Hennessy would try to have a little fun at his expense. It didn't always pay off for him, but he would try, wouldn't he?
Well, people would push him into it, and and I think we were at a media day down at Lake Martin one time, and a media weekend rather, and Ms. Bryan asked him to do the imitation of a drunk person. He didn't want to do it, and she kept pushing. He had to get up there and do it, and he did this scene there in front of all the media, and it just brought the house down because he could do it so good, and I think he even mocked Coach Bryan a little bit there, and that kind of thing with other things, not that, but with other things about wearing that houndstooth hat and that kind of thing.
Well, while we're telling a couple of stories, one of the great, and I know you've heard this when Coach Hennessy told me this story about when, how they'd grade film and said, Coach Bryant would be, grading the film and he'd be, check mark for this, negative for this. And he said he got a hold of some film when Coach Bryant was a player, and he got it up on the film projector and started grading Coach Bryant. And was all the coaches were in there laughing, and Coach Bryant came in.
Yeah.
And he was grading Coach Bryant's film. Oh, got a deduction for this, missed the block here. And he said Coach Bryant came in, and he said he had to tighten up on that in a hurry. He said all of a sudden it was like finest end I've ever seen.
Yeah, I remember that. All the rest of the coaches were trying. It was in one of those little offices on the second floor of the Coliseum, and all the other coaches were trying to get out.
Yeah.
Coach Bryant was standing in the doorway.
And Coach Hennessy's great.
Couldn't go anywhere, and dude was trying to get out of it, and he couldn't. And Coach Bryant finally said something and just turned around and walked off. But what he had to say wasn't nice.
No, and
but I can't repeat it on here.
No, yeah, I remember. I knew you know the story better than I. Yeah, some of that stuff cannot be repeated. And one more story while we're kind of going down memory lane here in honor of Coach Rutledge. Coach Griska would tell the story, and I know you've heard this one. Coach Bryant would assign in the off-season. He'd assign each assistant coach a game. They'd be in charge of preparation for that game. And Dr. White, you may have to help me, probably 1969 or 70, somewhere in there, but Alabama opened against Vanderbilt, and it was Coach Hennessy's game.
That's right.
And they went up to Nashville, and Vanderbilt had put in an entirely new, different schemes or whatever, nothing Alabama prepared for. And they look up in the second quarter, and I think Coach Griska said they were down 10, 13, 17 points, something like that, just getting outplayed. And they didn't have the headsets in those days, or Coach Bryant didn't wear headsets, but they had the phones. You pick up the phone.
That's right.
And Coach
I know
Bryant,
where you're going with this.
Yeah, Coach Bryant ran over to the phone, and Coach Hennessy was up there in the booth in the headset and already panicking, already trying to figure out what are we going to do, how are we going to adjust. And the good news is, I'll go ahead and tell the fans, the good news, Alabama came back and won the football game. But at this point, it looked bad, and Coach Griska said if you were an assistant coach, you never wanted to see Coach Bryant pick up that phone. And said he picked up that phone, and he's like, dude. And Coach Griska said Coach Hennessy, being the quick thinker that he was, he didn't want to deal with it. And Coach White, he said, dude started going.
Putting noise on the phone.
Putting static in that phone. So that Coach Bryant would be like, dude. And I guess somebody had handed Coach Bryant the phone down there, and Coach.
Well, he took it off Mal's head.
That's what it was. Took it off Mal, yeah.
And he took it off. So he really didn't take it off Mal's head. He just pulled on it and was going to talk through one side of it, and the other side was still on Mal's head, and Mal was trying to get out of it and that kind of thing, and it was just a escalated deal there.
So Coach Hennessy puts the static in there, and Coach Bryant says, darn, I'll say darn, you know the word he said, thing don't work. Yeah, you're right. Coach Mal put the headset back on, and Coach Hennessy told him, Mal, if you ever give him that headset again, I'll shoot you right between the eyes.
That's right, he did. Coach Bryant handed that thing back to Mal when he finally got through it, and he said, we need to get some new ones, new phones out here.
Oh, mercy. I tell you could sit around with those guys, the stories that they could tell.
It's unreal.
In closing here, I know this is a hurtful time for you because you were so close to Coach Rutledge, and we talked about what a great gentleman he was. But what'll be your friendship with him and the things that you know about him? What'll be your biggest takeaway from having known Jack Rutledge?
Well, just the friendship. He was just special to me, I tell you. We just went through a lot together, and when you do that, you grow closer, through time. And as we got older, our friendship even developed that much more. And just having him as a friend just means all to me. And his family, I just hurt for them, and I know it's a tough time on them, but I'll always remember Jack and always have him in my heart. Mm-hmm. And the memories that we had together, and you just can't take away memories. I
No,
heard
you can't.
a statement one time that when someone dies and they leave, if you've got them in your heart, you've still got them, and that's the way I feel about Jack.
Well, Dr. White, it's good to visit with you, even under the circumstances. We appreciate you taking some time out and talking about Coach Rutledge today.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for asking me.